What's up, Bucs fans? Welcome to another edition of the Power Parlay podcast here on the Sick Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, JC Allen, and that's all she wrote. Fat Lady has sung. The season is over. Put your cigars out. The Buccaneers fell to the Washington Commanders to end their season. Tough game, tough environment to be around afterwards. And we'll get into all that and more. Liam Coen, is he staying? Is he going? What the Bucs have been up to recently. Just signed a bunch of players to future contracts. We'll go over those. Which ones might be meaningful? Which ones might just be guys who, will just be practice squad fodder and maybe not make it out of training camp. We'll also touch on what the Bucs' are offseason plans should look like. What should they be attracting? How can they open up some cap space? And maybe take a little peek into the draft too. Toss out a couple names that they could look at as well. We'll get into all that and more with a special guest after the break.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
Thank you for everyone for joining. Three things. If you just like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Appreciate that. Appreciate everyone always tuning in, whether you're live, whether you're listening on the podcast after. Appreciate everyone for stopping by, tuning in. We got a very special guest. He is the host of the Buccaneers podcast. Lucky to call him a friend. We broke the curse this year. Every other game we've gone to at the same time, the Bucs have lost. We broke the curse this year against the Raiders, and the Bucs were victorious in that one, although it didn't look like it for a while there until Tyke Smith's big play, his interception on Brock Bowers down in the red zone, and then that's when the Bucs kind of turned it around. But we did it nonetheless. He is Tampa Tones. Tampa Tones, how are you doing, buddy?
Oh, we've seen better days, brother. That's for sure. But hey, another playoff appearance, another season. That's all you can really ask for. I know everybody aspires for the Super Bowl, but I will tell you something. If we would have lost that game against the Raiders, I think me and you would have been banned from appearing at the same Bucs game at the same time. That was probably at the Raiders' darkest point of their season. But glad to be here. Wish it was under better circumstances, but sadly, only one team could come out happy at year's end. It wasn't us this year, but we overcame a lot, and I am proud of the guys for battling as they did all season.
So that's my first question to you. You sound optimistic. Would you call the season a success after not reaching the same heights they did last year, making the divisional round? They did, however, improve on their record with one more win, going 10-7. Obviously, won the division again for the fourth straight year. They'd certainly have a lot of adversity to overcome this season. Losing two of the guys behind you right there, and Godwin for the year and Evans for a stretch of 3 games. Was this a successful season in your mind with everything they've gone through, or were you expecting more?
It's hard to really decide if it's a success or it's a failure, because success is usually taking a step in the right direction. It's kind of making progress, at least in terms of sports. You want to see that happen. But at the end of the day, it's hard to call it a failure because you did win the division. You did make the playoffs. It's not like you got blown out. To me, the Bucs win that game 9 times out of 10. A couple plays didn't go their way. A couple things didn't happen, which they executed on all year correctly. But if I was only in position to say one, which it sounds like I am, I would lean success. I'd hate to call it a huge success, because ultimately, if we won this game and played close against the Eagles, you could call it a moderate success, but I still call it a successful season. We made the playoffs. Pretty much the last 7 weeks of the year was a playoff game every week in theory, minus the one against Dallas. A lot of people knew we can afford to lose one of those games probably, and that happened to be the case. Ultimately this year, we went into Detroit, we won. We beat a Philly team, although they were banged up with injuries at the time. We were still able to beat the Eagles. Week 1, you beat the Commanders. Obviously, that feels like a season ago, and we lost to them recently. Then you go on the road and you smoke the Chargers pretty good, and they were one of the hottest teams in the AFC until they met Houston there at the end. So it's one of those intermixed seasons, which, it does leave you tasting for more. You wish you had more. I wish I had a game this week to prepare for, the podcast for. But at the end of the day as well, it's hard to call it a failure to me because you did win the South. You overcame adversity. You overcame injuries. You were trailing Atlanta pretty much by 3 games at one point in time,
Right.
getting the tiebreaker. You're at 4-6. You're losing heartbreakers left and right to playoff teams like, I know they didn't make it, but San Fran, Kansas City, and the likes of those. You battle back. You give yourself a shot. You have a really epic win at the end there against the Saints, although we find out they would have made it anyways as Atlanta loses. And then to me, you're a couple plays away in Washington. If that snap from Graham Barton is executed, or if that isn't fumbled between Baker and McMillan, whatever the heck happened there, you're
Right.
probably moving on. So I'd consider it a success, not a big one, but I would consider it a success.
Yeah, it's tough. I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? You're certainly left wanting for more. I don't think you leave this game disappointed, as Rizzoli says, it was a brutal loss, and Richard in the comments says, "Hey fellas, still pained." It hurts for sure. I think when you look at it in a cosm, and it leaves you wanting for more. But I also think it gives you expectations and high hopes for next season. When you hope for a little bit more luck on the injury front, and you have some money to spend to go out and add some things, and we'll get into that later, what they might be able to open up and do. But I think it's one of these things where, like you said, 9 out of 10 times you probably beat that team. You're a couple of tough plays, tough stops that you didn't make, tough angles on tackles you didn't make from stopping them, converting on some of those 3rd and 4th downs. And you're, as you mentioned, a couple of mistakes away. Don't forget those offensive penalties as well. Penalties, the fumble, the botch snap, and just some missed opportunities along the way on offense as well. And we'll get into this game now. I'm going to ask you, what do you think was a bigger letdown? The offense not being able to get a lot going, even when they did have possession. I know they only had 7 possessions, or the defense not being able to get a stop on 3rd down and letting them have such extended drives. So what do you blame more this loss here? Is it the offense or the defense?
The offense has bailed us out all season long, it seems like. So I will give him a pass this game. And although they made a couple big stops at times, I will say the defense. If you look at the scores throughout the other playoff games, throughout every single other playoff game, it's almost like the 20 points the Buccaneers got would have been enough to beat many of those teams, if not all those teams. I know the game would change if the Bucs are playing those teams and scores would change, but in theory, that 20 points should have been enough. So although it was a valiant effort by the defense, I think they made some critical stops. I think I disagree greatly with PFF's grade at Kalijah Cansey. I think him and some other defenders played their tails off to keep the Bucs in that football game. But at day's end, they were a play away here, a play away there. They didn't give the ball to the offense enough, in my opinion, for the offense to be as potent as they could have been, like they have all year. I think they ran in the 20 less snaps than Washington. They only had 44, 45 snaps of offense as a unit. That doesn't equate to many points most of the time. And the fact of the matter is 20 would have been enough to win, in theory, other playoff games. Valiant effort by the defense. I know it battled injuries, but at the end of the day, they had some costly penalties, and they couldn't get off the field for some costly snaps to give the offense their ball back. Now, granted, yes, they did make a 4th and goal stop. Offense get the ball back and fumbled, but the defense had a few more opportunities to correct themselves and never really did. And, I would have liked to see Bowles be a little more aggressive perhaps and take the pressure off the defense a little more. But sadly, the defense has played the hand they're dealt, and they didn't come through more times than not at day's end.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the defense, anytime you let teams go, for over 50% on 3rd down, and 4 for 5, 3 for 5 on 4th down, that's tough. Bucs only were able to possess the ball for 44 plays, and 18 of those were scripted runs. 18 of those were pass attempts, and the other 7 here were not including penalties that negated plays, but the other 7 here were Baker scrambling and trying to make stuff happen. They didn't allow the Buccaneers offense to do what they could do. And to be honest with you too, you look at the Bucs, they struggled in their own right. They offense, they did not get things going. They marched down the field. I think you'd like to see a little bit more aggressiveness. Early in the game, you're sitting there 4th and 7. You take the 50-yard field goal there, but later in the game, you're dealing with a 4th and 2, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
And Bowles doesn't get aggressive with it. You had another one late in the game, the 4th and 3. That was after the fumble exchange or the mishandled snap. Like, there's some opportunities here that Bowles definitely should have been more aggressive. I agree with you there. While his team was on offense, never mind on defense. Defense, the same old thing happened. It was lack of tackling, missed tackles. It was poor communication. It was Jamel Dean going down injured again, and having Josh Hayes have to step in, who is not a great football player. I don't know who gets the brunt of the blame here. Is it the defense and Todd Bowles for not having his players? And mind you, this is the Buccaneers let up 13 points in the second half. Before that, they'd only let up 6 points in the last 4 games. So it's not like they even course corrected in the second half. When they went into halftime tied 10, they didn't come out of the half and course correct like they did on the defense in the second half. If anything, it was worse. The Bucs definitely came out flat, I think, on both sides of the ball, and then they just stayed flat. You had some splash plays here and there. Mike Evans made some big plays. Bucky Irving had a nice run. Baker Mayfield had a nice scramble. But outside of that, it was just a flat day for both sides of the football in a playoff game. You played these last, like you said, you played these last 7 weeks like it's a playoff game. Then you come out for the playoff game, and it just felt like it wasn't there.
Some just seemed flat, altogether a little bit. You weren't executing on your normal plays that you normally execute all season. I think the Bucs are one of the most successful teams at running end arounds this year. Jalen McMillan's been on fire the past 6 weeks of football. And Baker Mayfield was incredible this year. Everything goes wrong on that one little play and really changes the momentum of the game. Again, it's incredible because if you watch that game, although the Commanders, dominated the time of possession, you still walk away feeling like the Bucs should have won that football game. And today I'm sitting here, I watch film, I watch the highlights, I watch recaps. I still think the Bucs should have won that football game. So I agree with you. This is probably the hardest time to tell who's really to blame. I think the offense wasn't as crisp as they were all year, and I think the defense kind of was who they were all year, sadly, and it equated to one disappointing loss. And hey, it stinks even more because that doink almost helped us out so great at the end, and then it's almost like you lose twice because you hear that noise and it gives you optimism, but then you see that puppy still fade through the upright. So really weird loss, disappointing loss. What can you do? I blame the defense, but offense could have done better surely as well.
Speaking of blame, a lot of fans are calling for Todd Bowles' job. They're calling for his head right now. And I get it. Look, some clock management situation. There's a timeout snafu again. As Richard says, am I being ridiculous for blaming Bowles for not being aggressive enough? Seeing Dan Quinn going for it on every 4th down got me thinking why Bowles wasn't that aggressive. And then when you talked to Bowles the other day, he kind of said that, the offense wasn't playing as good. So he didn't have faith in the offense. That's been kicking butt every time. This is the direct quote right here. It was 3rd and 1, obviously. We go backwards. It was 4th and 3. We shot ourselves in the foot a few times on that drive, so it's easier to tie the ball game in that situation. If we're moving the ball at ease and getting down there every single time, we probably would have went for it. At the time when we were going for it, we had it 3rd and 1. We thought we had 2 downs to get 1 yard. We didn't get it. We went backwards. If we didn't get it, it was 2017 and possibly lose the ball game. So at least we had the tie and try to get the defense to get the ball back. This is an offense, though, that had been humming all season long. 2 mistakes on a drive, and you're going to just take that away from them. Again, lack of aggressiveness. That's one thing that he's been called on for. There's certainly things that he's not been called on. Leader of men, keeping the guys motivated even through tough stretches. There's definitely some positives to Todd Bowles as a coach. But those negatives too. Are those negatives enough that he should lose his job? And second part of that question, if not, do you think Todd Bowles can lead this team to a Super Bowl?
I don't think he should lose his job personally. And I know I'm in the minority here, as crazy as that sounds, but he's made the playoffs, not only made the playoffs, but won his division 3 straight years. I know the record's not overwhelming. I know the record's not great. And I know you don't strive to just be the best of 4 teams, but he was here as part of the culture change in 2019 when we brought in Bruce Arians and started flipping the script. And I think Levante David's comments are telling, hey, you guys don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We all love playing for Bowles. Right. May exaggerate his words a little bit there, but at the end of the day, you get the idea that a lot of these guys will go to war for Coach Bowles, given the hand he was dealt. I think he absolutely deserves another season. He's one of only 3 coaches currently in the NFL to make the playoffs and win their division for 3 straight seasons now, join an elite company like the likes of Andy Reid. So pretty impressive stuff there. And at the end of the day, let's not forget the only kryptonite in Patrick Mahomes' recent playoff tour, I'm going to call it a tour because it's like he's on tour, going to every city and bringing home money, it's been Todd Bowles' defense when the Bucs shut him down and held him really to no offense a couple Super Bowls back. So I'm going to give Bowles the benefit of the doubt. Now, I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not saying there's not room for improvements and he can't change. I would like to see potentially some personnel change on the coaching staff on a couple sides of the ball, but that's neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, I would love to give Bowles another chance. I understand the optimism of Liam Coen. I understand he's one of the best play callers in the league already, and I understand his potential, the key word potential as head coach. But we've been in this spot before covering Bucs and being Bucs fans podcasting about the Bucs. We had a guy named John Gruden who brought us a Super Bowl and ran him out of town because Raheem Morris got an interview way back when. And, you know, we promoted Raheem Morris and we saw how that turned out. Not great here. Same thing with Dirk Cutter, promoted him. And I'm not comparing Liam Coen to those guys because I do think he has the potential to be a better head coach down the road. But I think this Bucs team could figure it out. Where Todd Bowles is for now. You give him another year or 2. You tell him to change some things up on his coaching staff personnel-wise. And then you tell Liam, hey, we're going to give you a pay bump right now. You stick around a little bit, and I promise you, in a year or 2, you will not regret leaving because you're still going to have, hopefully, Evans and Godwin around, although a little older. You're still going to have Baker. You're going to have a guy like Wirfs and Godecki and Cody Mauch and all these big offensive linemen, Bucky Irvin. You're still going to have a lot of core pieces there in a year or 2. Just hold your horses. Why go to another spot like a Vegas or Jacksonville or New York that's been so inept in the front office alone that could turn you away? Stay here in Tampa. Keep it in the house from Bruce Arians to Todd Bowles to Liam Coen. Not as great or not the extent as Pittsburgh, but if you get to hand the torch from coach to coach to coach, it speaks volumes on the culture. I think Liam is a man who enjoys Tampa. Now, if you get that money, you get that opportunity dangled in front of you, you never know what could happen. But right now, I would say Liam Coen and Todd Bowles will both be back, and I think absolutely Todd Bowles deserves to be back.
So that's the question, too. And I wonder if that's the, maybe not because people were calling for Todd Bowles last year as well. But if Liam wasn't so impressive and didn't already have interviews, do you think the fan base would be this loud?
And that's the thing, right? Because last year it felt like you heard the basement of those growls over Dave Canales. He wasn't really getting a lot of love and attention outside of Carolina, but you heard a couple whispers last year, hey, we should promote Canales, right? We're going to lose him, blah, blah, blah. Well, look what happens. Canales gets a coaching job, and then we end up upgrading at offensive coordinator. And then a guy like Liam Coen comes in. People in preseason could tell this guy was going to kill it. So, yes, I absolutely agree with you, JC, that just the fact of the love he was getting, the interviews being requested, I think the chirps get a little louder. I think the murmurs get a little louder. And let's not lie, Sean McVay continuing his success doesn't help quiet the crowd, because at the end of the day, Liam Coen is tied to the hip of McVay in terms of coaching tree, coaching staff, coaching background.
Yeah.
That, McVay, here he is. He beats a 14-win team with all these California shenanigans going on. He doesn't even get his home game, and he makes it look easy. People see that and go, is that what we're going to get with Liam Coen? And then at the end of the day, too, the leaf is turning in the NFL, where it is, for better or worse, becoming a young man's world. A lot of people see the age on Bowles, not that he's old, but then they look at Liam Cohen's age and they go, we could have Liam Coen here for 20 years. They get all excited. So I think the fans keep the pressure rising for multiple reasons. One of them is the love he's getting. And, he is a fan favorite. He's not a bad dude. He's a smart dude, intelligent dude. You watch his press conferences every Thursday. He's one of the smartest, if not the smartest football minds I've ever heard. So he's going to get a head coaching job one day. It just depends when, not if. And it depends where. And hopefully it's here, because the dude does deserve it. But not sadly, but in weird circumstances, Todd Bowles hasn't done enough to get him fired, which oddly a lot of the fan base seems to want. So the Bucs are in a weird position right now between Coen and Bowles, where they both kind of have their fan bases. They both kind of have their lovers and haters, and it's causing for a lot of weird problems within the fan base right now.
Yeah. So here's my take on the whole situation. I think Bowles deserves another season. And again, those are things that drive you nuts. Do I think he could lead this team to a Super Bowl? Yes, with a caveat though. That's if Coen remains, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And if they invest heavily on defense. Since Todd has been here, you look at the timeline, and I've talked about this multiple times. Todd has never got to assemble a team or be part of assembling a team that he's really wanted to have as a head coach. He comes in late. He gets everything that's already done in free agency, and he inherits the whole staff. Next season, he's able to hire his new staff, brings in Dave Canales and some other pieces, and brings in new running backs coach and George Edwards and some pieces like that. But he's hit with a Brady bill, and they can't do anything really. They signed Baker to a $4 million deal, hoping that he can compete with Kyle Trask and maybe push him. They don't have money to sign any big players. They're hitting the bottom of the well and trying to, catch some tuna with rice. I don't know the old saying, but they're trying to make, I don't know. And then this past season, okay, he loses his offensive coordinator. He's got to find a new offensive coordinator, and he still doesn't have any money to go out and make any impact signings, because now all that money's tied up to bringing back your team. Mike, Levante, Baker, Antoine, Tristan, and paying those guys. He's never had some cash to really go out and spend and say, all right, this is a premier cornerback or premier edge rusher or premier linebacker or defensive tackle or whatever it is, or just guys who aren't bargain basement finds. Jordan Whitehead, I think he wanted him back, but I think Jason wanted him back just as much. Jason's been very vocal about how it was one of the biggest mistakes that he's made as a GM was letting Jordan get out the door. And I mean, certainly didn't look like it this season. Even when he was healthy, Jordan struggled. Not to kick a man while he's down and hope the best for a speedy recovery, but his play was very sporadic and up and down this season. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big part of why I think Bulls deserves another chance. Will they actually have some money? We'll get into what they can have and who might be available a little bit later in the show. But I think that's the biggest thing. As for Liam Coen, it's a shiny new toy, right? And he got the Bucs offensive running game going, and he got the offense going. And I think Liam's going to be an incredible head coach somewhere. I think he's got all the intangibles. Leader of a team, I don't know. necessarily how he does that. He's never done it before, but hey, neither did Dave. And look at what the Panthers did the final month and a half of the season. Now, they only won 2 or 3 games, but they took a lot of good teams to the wire, including the Bucs, Chiefs, and Eagles. They looked really impressive in a lot of those games, and you can tell that roster, once it's finally stacked with talent, will turn it around. Talent's already here in Tampa for the most part, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I know, speaking to some of the guys on defense, they are very high on Liam Coen. We know the offensive staff is, and personnel is, but defensive staff personnel is very high on Liam and what he brings to the table. But I don't think now's the time. And I don't think Liam thinks now's the time either. As you mentioned it, why would you go to the Giants? Why would you go to the Jags or the Jets or one of these teams are not in good position right now for him. And you know, you're always waiting for the perfect opening. Sometimes it never exists, but I just think there will be better opportunities for him, including maybe taking over as the Bucs. Remember, Bull said he was going to coach forever. You know, he's not coaching until he's super old. He's got 2 years left on his deal. That could potentially be a situation where, as you said, maybe you promote him, give him a hefty raise, move him to assistant head coach, give him some more of those responsibilities as far as broad picture responsibilities, kind of take a little bit off of what Bowles is doing, allow him to focus on the defense more. And then I think that really kind of sets him up to either replace Bowles or find something new next year. But again, there's 32 of these jobs, only 32. And you never know what could happen from season to season, where 1 minute you're a hot candidate, the next minute you're struggling to get interviews, a la Bobby Slowick for the Texans. So that's my whole take on it.
Yeah, and a couple of things you said I could piggyback on here quickly. I think it's interesting that, again, if you give him the assistant head coach title, that would be great. And maybe that worked already before, and we don't really know about it, right? Because Bruce Arians kind of kept alluding to the point that his successor, he didn't make it clear who, but between the 4 main coordinators or assistant coaches on his staff, Bowles, Leftwich, Goodwin, or Keith Armstrong, one of them were going to be his successor. And I remember breaking it down. I think your work back in the day, I remember reading, or Scott Reynolds, one of the two, but the article on the 4. And then, you know, it reminded me of when Todd Bowles was getting a lot of coaching interviews right after the Bucs won the Super Bowl. I believe he got 3 or 4 head coaching interviews.
Minnesota was one of them for sure. I can't remember who else.
Chicago, I think, might have been one of them. A couple other of them as well. But it reminded me of right now where Liam Coen's suddenly getting interviews too. So maybe you had it back in the day, even where Bruce Arians kind of told Bowles on the side, because I remember the Bucs gave him a pay grade as well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
They did.
So maybe the Bucs did this before. Maybe Todd Bowles was chipped his successor, deemed a successor. Maybe he came back for a pay grade, kept it under the table, and maybe that's what Bowles is doing now, hopefully, or maybe will do with the Liam Coen, right? Maybe the Bucs see him getting interviews, because Bruce Arians' retirement came at a surprise, and maybe it wasn't a surprise to Bowles, right? So maybe the same thing's happening here. Maybe Bowles is going to sit down with Liam and tell him, hey, you know, Jason Light there too, we'll give you a little pay grade. You stick around a little bit. And a year and a half from now, next March comes around, I'm going to retire. The reins will be yours regardless. And then another thing, just say Liam Coen does leave. I'm playing devil's advocate here. Who's to say the Bucs can't strike gold or hot iron and get another really good offensive coordinator, right? Remember the panic when Canales left was, hey, we can't upgrade. You know, we're going to be in no man's sorry to steal the thunder a little early, but
it's all right. It's all right.
They're going to be a top destination for all the offensive coordinators out there. So the role gets flipped, right? The past couple, not last year, but the year before when you hired Dave Canales, he was guy number 11 or 12 who walked through that door. It was around Valentine's Day where you had to make that hire official. That's not common. Nobody wanted the job. Last year, garnered a little more interest, enticed some guys like Coen. But this year, all of a sudden, if you're an offensive coordinator looking to elevate their game again, and you're looking at Tampa's situation, you know, money aside, which you save if you do live in the Sunshine State, but you look at it as a football field standpoint, hey, I'm going to have Mike Evans. I'm going to have Jalen McMillan. I'm going to have a loaded tight end room regardless. I'm going to have a nice offensive line, Baker Mayfield. Yeah, we could use work here and there, but at the end of the day, you're going to have a strong top to bottom roster. So just a couple of those things, devil's advocate, if Coen does leave, maybe we do better. Maybe we stay stagnant. Who knows? And then the Bucs have done the successor thing before from Arians to Bowles. So who knows what's going on behind the scenes right now.
Right, and that's a good point too. Like I said, Bowles got 2 years left on his deal. He's hinted at it. Not coaching forever. Is it something where, hey, stick around 2 years, job's yours, you get some experience, assistant head coach, whatever. The one thing I will say, and I was going to bring that point up too, that the Bucs would be a hot destination for an offensive coordinator. They wouldn't have to go out and beg someone, but I think it kind of puts them also in a tough spot too. It limits their kind of search they can have, because I think what they would like to have is an offense similar to the one they're running and not have to learn a whole new offense. There was some crossover from Dave and Liam, not a ton of it, but enough of it where that it was able for them to kind of absorb it quicker than normal. If you get someone here who's taking the banana offense they're running now and switching it to an apple, like that could cause some setbacks for everybody, and you don't want that. So I think that could kind of handicap them a little bit. And also it's difficult, you're going for, this is your fourth year and your fourth different offensive coordinator and your fourth different offense. The continuity sucks, and again, that's the problem with having defensive minded head coaches, because if you find a good offensive one, they're sticking around for 2 years and then they're gone. If that, Dave only went for one. And he was gone. So it's one of those things too, where like when you're looking at it, okay, yeah, it could definitely be an attractive spot, but who's going to be the right fit with this offense to run this offense? It not exactly how Liam and certainly how Dave ran it, but similar stylistically. Who's that next hot young guy or anything like that? Or do you go to the old coach recycle tread and now you're messing with kind of someone who's going to put in something that may not be similar? So it's that very delicate balance that Bowles has as well, if he does have to hire a new offensive coordinator. Because Liam, and let's talk about, while we're talking about him, he's interviewing today with the Jags, probably already done his interview at this point. Peter Schrager saying that they're not the only team that's interested, and his interest is starting to ramp up now that the Bucs are out of the playoffs. What could that look like? Let's kind of just follow the breadcrumbs on where Bucs GMs are or assistant GMs are going. It seems like Ben Johnson's a lock for the Raiders already, potentially. But if John Spytek goes over there, we know the relationship that he has with the players. Waited outside the locker room to say goodbye, and hell of a season to all the players, every single one that came out of there. Was that his goodbye? Maybe, I don't know. But could he want to bring in a guy like Liam Coen instead of a Ben Johnson if he gets the Raiders job? Mike Greenberg going up to New York. If he gets that job, does he want to bring Liam Coen with him? Certainly probably bring Jackie Davidson, but does he want to bring Liam Coen and make him the head coach? Another name to throw out there too, Thad Lewis. Could he make Thad Lewis a head coach? That has been around. He's now been in 4 different offensive systems. He's had some get around. Could he kind of be in that mix, or potentially offensive coordinator? But I digress. Or he's already had a second interview with the Tennessee Titans, John Spytek again. They've got a quarterback there. I don't know if you heard of him. Will Levis?
Mayo boy. Will Levis, Kentucky.
Yeah, who was the offensive coordinator at Kentucky for Levis's final season?
Liam Coen, and let's be honest, Will Levis has looked the best he ever has. I know it was college, different than the pros, obviously, right? But something got him drafted that high, and that was Liam Coen helping him progress.
Liam Coen and his offense. Now they have Bryce Callahan there, or Brian Callahan, whichever one it is. Not the motor parts guy. But is that something where he could say, hey, this guy has worked with him. We don't have to give up on him. We don't have to take Cam Ward this year. We don't have to take Shedeur Sanders this year. Like these are second round quarterbacks that we're going to take with the first overall pick. Let's bring in Liam, have him work with Levis, at least buy us another year to kind of reassess, see if he can jumpstart his career again. just throwing names out there. If there's going to be more out there, those are some teams to look out for, especially if Bucs GMs go there. What is your confidence level, though, that Liam Coen will be back? If you had to put a number on it, or 1 to 5, or a letter grade on it, no minuses or pluses, what would you give it?
I'd say probably a 65% chance he's back. I'd say there's
Neither one of those was what I said.
I know. Well, you started with percent. Letter grade.
No, just go.
I'll give it a B, a solid B that he's back. Not a B plus.
You just went from a C to a B.
Well,
D.
It depends, man. Modern grade schooling is a different curriculum.
That's so crazy, man. I'm trying to do math with my son. I don't know how to do 5 plus 12.
All right, so I guess that would be a C or C plus or whatever it is. So let's go with a 70% C. Whatever 70% is a C, whatever. But I give it that percent for multiple reasons. I know you laid out the beautiful path of Spytek potentially going to Vegas, maybe Tennessee or Greenberg maybe going to the Jets. But let's be honest here. The Jets are in a terrible situation. Even if Greenberg does go there, I find it hard to believe that Liam Coen would want to, quote unquote, risk his golden ticket for the New York Jets, potentially be a one and done. You never know with their ownership over there. He's basing if Liam Cohen's Madden rating ain't high enough, he might be a one and done in New York. Let's be honest with you. And then Tennessee, they have a coach right now, but if Spytek does go there, I could see potentially Liam being inclined to stay in Tampa, knowing that might give him 2 avenues next year to a head coaching gig. It could give him the Bucs job, or say if Callahan doesn't work out, Callahan Auto Parts at your service. But if he doesn't work out, they could let him go. And next thing you know, he could have a very desirable situation in Tennessee with either a young quarterback, if they take one, or another high draft pick if they flop. And then Raiders, I don't see, like you said, Ben Johnson just makes sense. And obviously, I think a dark horse for Vegas is Pete Carroll, because if you map out that division, you got Harbaugh, you got Andy Reid, you got Sean Payton. That's some big boy football. And not only that, you pair Herbert with Harbaugh, Mahomes with Reid, Bo Nix with Payton. You got a lot of firepower head coaches. You got a lot of young quarterbacks still. It's one of those things where, hey, power to you if you hire a guy like Ben Johnson or Liam Coen, but they might not be able to keep up with the vets. So to me, their fallback plan might be a guy like Pete Carroll, who Brady has spoke highly of, played him in the Super Bowl. We know what that's about. But at the end of the day, I think that doors could be closing on opportunities. Balky's always going to hinder that Jacksonville job, and I don't want to hear Khan said he'd move on from him, blah, blah, blah. If he was even open to that, why wouldn't you do that already? If you know he was going to hinder the head coaching search of the Jaguars, why wouldn't you already move on from your GM job? Then the Bears are interviewing everybody under the sun. So the only surprise team I could maybe consider is a New Orleans, maybe throws their hat in the ring. And we've seen
that's not too many problems.
Oh, I agree. I'm saying in terms of interest in interviews and that sort of thing. But other than that, I don't see any of these opportunities really being his sole focus. The best route would be if Spytek went to Vegas, but I think he's third on their list behind Pete Carroll and behind Ben Johnson.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I would say I'm at about 85-90%. He's going to be back. I think he will. I really think when he said, that's the dream, but there's a job to do here, I believe him. I don't think, the Jags are the only one that's shown official interest. No one else has asked to interview him. I don't think the Jags is a good fit with Balky. It's tough to say because, again, there's only 32 of these jobs, but I think he's probably leaning to come back to Tampa at least for another year, hone his skills and see where this can go, especially if they make some additions on the defensive side of the ball. So that's where I'm at. Before we move on, we're growing longer.
Longer.
You called it. We'll shout out one of our sponsors here, FanGo Tickets. FanGo Tickets is our locally owned and operated ticket events, your number one source for live events in Tampa Bay. Check them out. If you're tired of getting blitzed by big ticketing companies, turn to FanGo, your exclusively locally owned and operated Tampa Bay ticketing partner that offers fans like you full transparency. They prioritize fair pricing and no hidden fees so that Tampa fans can enjoy events without unexpected costs. Visit fango.com for unbeatable prices, personalized seat selection, and local partnerships that take your game to the next level. Check out Fango tickets. They're doing some awesome things there. You can actually partner reservations at a local bar that's around Amalie Arena. So you have your tickets, you have reservations, a combo deal there. So you can get a burger and beer for cheap, parking. They're partnering with hotels. You can also get Rays tickets there, Lightning tickets there, concert tickets, all sorts of stuff. Check out fangotickets.com. Let's jump into some offseason discussion because technically Tampa Tones, we are in the offseason. So let's do it real quick. Buccaneers signed 18 players to future contracts. The latest being today, linebacker Deion Jennings, who was with the Baltimore Ravens as an undrafted rookie free agent. We'll start with the rookies. Marcus Banks signed on. Garrett Greenfield, who they signed on January 1st. He's an offensive tackle. He signed back. Antonio Greer Jr., Daniel Griziak. Then we also had Dennis Houston, who joined the club late. He's a wide receiver. Tanner Canoe, the wide receiver, who was with them all through camp and then came back. He's on there, as well as quarterback Michael Pratt, running back DJ Williams, and safety Rashad Wisdom. Some of the second-year guys on here. Third-year guys going to be Luke Haggard and Mike Green. Luke Haggard, an offensive lineman. Mike Green, defensive lineman. Also going to be tight end Tanner Towla, offensive lineman Raekwon O'Neal. And then some guys who are new additions to the squad this year. Some veterans in Marquez Callaway, Dallas Flowers. Both of those guys saw some time this season on special teams. I think Callaway might have caught a ball on offense. Deion Jones, a linebacker, former Falcon, former Panther. Only stop he hasn't made is New Orleans yet in the NFC South, but he came on. He actually played really well on his first defensive snaps of the season. He played, I believe, 14 snaps on the special teams before that, but he had a nice play in coverage and also a tackle. Lorenz Metz, the 6'7" giant from Germany, signed back as well. Out of these players, who's got you excited? Any of these guys got you excited for what they could potentially develop, or are these guys more likely just guys who are going to be on the practice squad and fighting for a future practice squad job next year?
I don't know about excited, but intriguing perhaps for me. I'll throw a couple of out there. For example, wide receiver. You look at Ryan Miller this year, and last year he was kind of in the same spot. He was battling practice squad, then he signed a futures contract. Next thing you know, he's on the active roster and caught a couple of touchdowns this year. If a guy like Canoe could catch on, he was active a couple times this year. Things didn't go his way, a little banged up throughout the year as well. But if he could somehow catch on, kind of grow into that Ryan Miller type role where, hey, the Bucs might need a depth wide receiver at some point eventually. We know a guy like Evans and Godwin, they're awesome. They give it their all, but say if Godwin's back, that's assuming he's back. They always miss a game or two here or there. So you're going to need the depth there, especially because I think Trey Palmer's gone as well. So a wide receiver intrigues me. Also, pair of safeties between Banks and Wisdom. We know this Buccaneers team is going to revamp the secondary surely, at least a little bit. We know Winfield and Whitehead were injured early and often this year. Obviously, they got Tyke and Izzy in, but they both missed times as well. So I think the secondary changes up slightly this year, more so corners, but safeties do intrigue me a little bit. I could see maybe one of them playing their way into a backup role. Izzy was a UDFA here, although he was better his rookie year. He still was on the active last year, so wouldn't rule those guys out. Green on the defensive line, he was obviously active a good bit 2 years ago. Well, 2 seasons ago now. Gosh, not this past
On the active roster 2 seasons ago.
Exactly. So he's a guy that could always highlight you. Say you lose a Will Golston to retirement. Say you do lose a body like JTS, which likely to happen. Obviously, he's an edge, but still played some down snaps. So you never know if a Green is needed. And then the last two I'll mention are both linebackers. You talked to Jones' presence a little bit. down the stretch. I think he made some nice plays even in the playoff game. And, the linebacker position is going to be interior-wise, one that the Bucs have to hammer. Levante David, question mark in terms of his future. Obviously, KJ Britt's likely gone. To me, the Bucs don't bring a guy like him back. JJ Russell might be back, but it's pretty certain at this point.
Exclusive rights free agent, so he'll be back.
Exactly, but at this point, he's pretty much proven. Nothing against him. He's a third or fourth linebacker, more so.
He's on the bubble. He's fighting.
Yep, exactly, and I love JJ Russell's depth, so I'm very happy with him there. But I think the door's open for another backup interior linebacker spot, and Greer was on the active, and Jones was on the active. I think those are two names to watch as well. So I'd put Jones, Greer, Canu, Wisdom, Banks, and Green on my quote-unquote more intriguing list. Now, a guy like Pratt, the quarterback, hey, can he develop into the backup maybe, save the Bucs some money? A guy like Kyle Trask leaves in free agency, although I think he might be back on a minimal deal as well. But say a guy like Trask leaves, opens the door to the Bucs' second, third-string quarterback. I think a guy like Pratt could at least stick around. You've seen the Bucs. They're not like the Cowboys. They don't try and save money around here. They try and get their guys the best bang for their buck. They promoted Pratt a couple times this year so he could get that active roster paycheck and to kind of show him, hey, we want you around. We'll promote you a couple times, but we do want you here in Tampa. So he's an intriguing one if he could sneak his way into the backup quarterback role next year. That wouldn't really surprise me given Baker Mayfield's toughness, and it seems like he's not determined to miss football games anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I got the same similar list. I think Marcus Banks and Rashad Wisdom. I think those are two guys who I'm looking at. In a banged up safety room. It doesn't. I don't love the fact that they signed Ryan Neal, who was out of football, over them promoting Marcus Banks to Rashad Wisdom. But another year and offseason to develop. What could they become? Could they become serviceable special teams, safety four or emergency elevation guys? That's going to be interesting for me to watch. I think Antonio Greer Jr., you mentioned him. He really came on in training camp, rookie mini camp, playoff, preseason football. Wasn't really given an opportunity on defense. Only had a couple snaps this season on defense. More played special teams as that fourth linebacker. I'm intrigued to see how his development continues. I'm out on Mike Green. I'm just there. You made the roster and then you just regressed the last 2 years to the point where you're not even elevated at all as a practice squad guy.
It's funny you said that because I was looking into him a little bit and I just kind of assumed he's hurt or was because we didn't hear his name at all. But yeah, that's a little disappointing in terms of his future.
Michael Pratt as well. What can he become? I definitely think the Bucs are going to sign a quarterback to compete with him or draft a quarterback to compete with him. I would say probably sign a veteran quarterback. I mean, kind of look at the market real quick and see what they've got out here for veteran backup quarterbacks. There's some guys. I don't know if Trask come. I think Trask probably wants a chance to prove himself somewhere else, get out of the Buccaneer Brady Baker shadow, and maybe try to win a job somewhere or at least be somewhere where they've got a rookie so he can kind of compete and see if he can beat the rookie out. Yeah. But there's tons of guys here that you could sign as a serviceable backup. Jared Stidham, if you want it, Andy Dalton,
Jameis.
Case Jameis, Case Keenum, Tyler Heineke, Easton Stick. I mean, these guys, none of these guys you trust to keep you afloat, if it's for an extended period of time. But did you really trust Kyle Trask either? There's a bunch of guys out there that they could kind of look at and say, okay, who do we want to roll with?
Josh Dobbs.
Yeah. Josh Dobbs, potentially the astronaut, right? Isn't he an astronaut or something?
Yep.
But yeah, I think him, and then Tanner Canu is interesting one because he's a kick returner, and I know everyone loves Trey Palmer, and I don't think Trey Palmer took advantage of his opportunity this season. Does maybe Tanner Canu give him a run for money for that wide receiver 4 or 5? 6 kick returner spot maybe next year? It could be interesting to watch. Lorenz Metz, just because he's a 6'7" and playing guard, is
Mhm.
interesting to me. But Raekwon O'Neal, I know, is someone they were high on before he left for Seattle and then came back. So I think if they're high on him and wanted him back, I think I'm interested in that. And Garrett Greenfield, I thought he was a guy who I was looking at in the draft last year. He ended up going undrafted, but I thought he could have been like a 5th or 6th developmental kind of swing tackle project. He played at South Dakota State with Mason McCormick, and if you guys know me, I was crushing hard on Mason McCormick last year, and he turned out to be a phenomenal player for the Steelers. It is 19, Richard. They're drafting at. So, I'm excited to see kind of what he develops into. But that being said, I know I said we're going to get into some free agency talk and maybe some draft talk and maybe some cap talk and all that fun stuff too, but we are up against it. We've exhausted our time here. So, teaser alert. We'll be talking about this again on the next episode. Maybe I'll bring Tones back. Maybe we'll go through it. I have a wonderful thread here by Josh Capo. As you guys know, he's a regular on the show. And pretty much breaking down what the Bucs cap space is and what they can make it with several moves and restructures. He does this every year. He is a cap guru for the Buccaneers. If check him out if you're looking for any cap updates. What it might cost to re-sign Luke Gedeke, what it might cost to re-sign a guy like Cade Otton, both of those guys looking for extensions, what it might cost to re-sign Zion McCollum. All three of those guys head into contract year, as well as Logan Hall and Rashad White. What is that going to look like for the Bucs? They do have some money to spend, but again, they have been drafting well, so every year it's going to get more and more difficult because they're going to have to re-sign players who are going into the final year of their deal, let them test free agency or try to sign them beforehand. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. So we've got a lot of stuff going on there. Offseason, we're in off-season mode now. The game is over. We talked about the Washington game. We talked about that. The only thing that's going to disrupt us talking off-season talk now is maybe a coaching move. That could be that could disrupt it. But we're looking at free agents. We're looking at this roster where it needs to improve. We're looking at we'll do a final grades for each position on the roster. We're going to go over my superlatives, postseason superlatives as well. All that and more. I figured we'd give this week a little bit time to digest, hit the news, and then we'll come back even stronger than ever, and we'll start to dive into the offseason and how the Bucs can get back to the Super Bowl, what the path looks like, and how they can improve. So, Tones, any final thoughts you have?
Yeah, I'd love to see the Bucs address left guard and edge in free agency. So if we do have talks in the future, I'd love to dip into those a little bit. And I love Trey Palmer, but as far as he goes, if your highlight of the year is because of a duck on the field, that's probably not the best opportunity for your 2025 roster spot. So I think this team's going to have a lot of battling to do this offseason. I think a lot of tough calls are going to have to be made. And I think people are in good hands with J.C. Allen to guide them through an offseason. Remember, it's not where we want it to be, but football is 24/7. The clock doesn't stop. And if you want to catch all the good stuff, you better be in tune with J.C. Allen. We got a lot of roster battles to be had. So I'm looking forward to it, all the moves and more here with you, my friend. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Where can everybody find you? Give the plug. And it can be a shameless one too. Feel no shame. I want you to plug the hell out of yourself.
Oh yeah, I'll plug it up a minute. Tampa Tones on Twitter X, it's X. So Tampa Tones on X, whatever. TAMPA Tones, TONES. And then the podcast Buccaneers, BUCCATEERS. We have a good time on there. JC's nice enough to sit down with us, mainly in the off season, because you guys know he's everywhere in the regular season, but we always pick his brain a little bit as well. So follow me at Tampa Tones on Twitter, add an S at the end for Instagram, and then Buccaneers for Twitter. We like to keep up with the good stuff this off season. We talk more than just Bucs, especially on Saturdays. We talk all sports. So keep up with us if you want your wrestling, if you want your baseball, and more on the weekends.
Did you say wrestling?
Oh, but is that the Rock I see over there? Is that who that is? The tribal chief is in the house. Wow, look at that.
Always prepared. Yeah, Tampa Tones, he's the best. He's the man. Check out Buccaneers, awesome show. Definitely check that out. That's going to do it for us, though, here at the Pirate Parlay Podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, JC Allen. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're listening live, appreciate you. Like, subscribe, turn notifications. If you're not, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. So next time you can catch us live. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, appreciate you guys there. Come check out our YouTube live. We're live every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We're going to keep that for now. We'll see what happens as we progress into the off season. But we'll keep that live Wednesday night here on the Pirate Parlay Podcast. Again, I'm JC Allen. We're out of here. Peace out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.